Jai Hind to all. In this video, I'm going to read from here chapter number 2, that is keeping cool, calm, and collected. So let's dive in. What does it really mean to be good at emotion self regulation? Maybe you picture someone who is proverbial, proverbial, cool, calm, and collected. But how does someone genuinely find themselves in that state? To master anything, we need to understand it. The next one is regulate emotions. Emotions are wonderful things. They add color or meaning and dimension to life. They make it all worth it. But emotions are not always reliable. Recall that they are geared toward ensuring the survival of our species. But that's a goal with somewhat lesser priority in daily life. Like other parts of you, your emotions, anxiety included, evolved for a reason. But that doesn't mean we have to be their mercy, especially given that modern life is so different from one our brains evolved in. First, it's worth not noting that emotions, including negative ones, are not a mistake or a problem. They are a normal, natural part of life, and we are not seeking to be free of them. Does anybody really want to be an emotion/slash robot? What we know that suppressing them is not the answer either, and that you should allow yourself to feel even your darkest of feelings, that you can release them. After all, suppression and Daniel cause their own problems, and you probably already know that simply ignoring how you really feel does little to make it go away. So, a person who is master of emotion regulation is not someone who experiences fear or less intense emotions. They are charge of their emotions rather than the other way around. There is a time and a place of expressing emotion needs, and sometimes you may just not be you may just not be in the right situation to do so. Yes, you may feel positively filled with rage and anger, but if you are sitting in a church during a somber funeral service, for example, you simply have to manage that emotions rather than letting it run wild. Regulating your emotion means dealing with your emotion needs a healthy and socially acceptable way, consciously and deliberately. This chapter will explain how you can release your emotion in ways that won't make it embark on a downward spiral. Emotions are a constant part of our lives. Every minute of every day we will feel sometimes, and our emotions can change in an instant. They are highs and lows that you experience every day, and how you deal with them can significantly affect your mental state and well being. Our ability to regulate the vast number of emotions that we feel also affect how people in our lives perceive us. It can be difficult when you are catch in these moments to regulate your emotions and think of the consequences. But the more you do it, the more it becomes habitual. The first and foremost way of thinking about emotional resilience and calm is the reactive response model. It is succinctly summed of the image below. Respond and react. Deliberate, impulsive. aware, unaware. Solution bet resolution, trouble bet problem. Overall, emotions regulation begins and ends with the image. To react to a situation means a complete lack of regulation because there is no thought. It is impulsive short term thinking. If we touch not a hot stove, we react by yanking our hand away as quickly as possible to avoid a burn. All we are focused on immediate relief, and rational thought is not possible during this splash. To respond is to take time to consider the alternatives and make a decision based on the information you have. It may not always be right one, but you won't be acting or impulse or elevate emotions. This is where rational thoughts lives, and either healthy coping mechanism can be utilized or the emotions are given time to process and freeze over. It isn't just about controlling what you feel, but also about thinking rationally about what the best course of action is. Focus less on your intense emotion impulse and more on desired outcomes and rational decisions. This is obviously impossible in case of the hot stove, but it is very rare that we are encountering the emotions equivalent of hot stove. The problem is that continually view any transgression as something that requires an immediate reaction, and it becomes hard coded into our habits until we are walking a volcanic reaction and not response. Thus, the important part of recognize here is you are probably so used to reacting that it is a chain of events cannot be mentally separated for you. For instance, when you wake up in the morning, you use the bathroom, brush your teeth, wash your face, and put your clothes on. It's likely that you will forget any of these elements. No, because just you like emotions reactions, they cannot be mentally separated from the trigger. They are linked in a way that isn't so natural now that you cannot imagine any other way. Let's imagine an example of a fight between a couple about where to spend the holidays. In this situation, it may have been that you both wanted to spend the holidays with your own family and they wanted to spend with theirs. Your reaction to this might mean that you immediately discount the other person's opinions and assume that they want to control your actions or that your family doesn't matter without even thinking about the purpose and weight behind your partner's words. You simply begin to throw blame, feel anger, and then pick up a fight about priorities. Of course, there are some emotional needs being exposed here. Responding would be entirely different. The first step of responding is to take a moment to think and ask why. The answer may be that they haven't seen their family in a far longer time. What if they have a family member in ill health? What if they dislike your family as your mother always loves passive aggressive statement about their weight? This brief pause of consideration allows you to understand to other person's perspective and allows a rational discussion where both people will be satisfied or at least a conclusion will be reached. Responding is almost never easy, but it is simple. Differentiating between reaction and responding is the first step toward true emotion regulation and keeping even nailed. It is the first place where self awareness can be your best friends. A regulation framework. After one or two intents where you have chosen the path of responding versus reacting, you may begin to see the value of keeping your emotions in a check. It's one of the most difficult tasks in the world, especially if you don't have much practice with it. This is the first and arguably toughest step, and there isn't much I can tell you about it other than to breathe deeply. Make sure not to act when your heart rate is elevated. Insert as insert as much time as possible between external trigger and your response, and continue to ask yourself on a constant basis why I'm feeling this. Soon you'll require a new set of tools for a greater emotional control. You will find that you are responding versus reacting, and yet your emotional states may not be updated or happy. You are still annoyed and peeved even though you haven't acted out. This is where a framework or emotional regulation comes in handy. Of course, some emotional responses require no regulation, mostly positive ones. Laughing at friends' joke or crying during the sad film are acceptable behaviors in their specific context. If an emotion is appropriate and helps you feel better, then there is no need to regulate. For example, your impatience and anger at waiting in a long line. It might make you feel better, but it is neither appropriate nor productive. How can you regulate something like this? By either expressing this frustration in alternative means or regulating your emotion composure. Stanford psychology JJ Gross came up with five-step method for regulating emotions. The first step to select the situation. This means that you should seek to avoid situations that trigger unwanted emotions in your first place whenever possible. If you have an allergy to peanuts, you can simply stay from them. Imagine that you have recently decided to partake, partake, partake in a marathon. Partake in marathon. You have been training hard. You have been training hard, eating healthy, and increasing your endurance. However, maybe you find you lose motivation when you see others at the gym and they seem to be running so much faster than you or lifting so much more than you. This is where you can employ this system. Maybe you will go for a more runs outside the instead of in the gym. It doesn't mean that you are escaping your problems. It simply means that you to keep your emotions off, you choose not surround yourself with things that might bring your negativity, remove yourself from dangerous situations so you don't have to regulate at all. You have more of say that thank you than thank the next step to modify the situation. This is when you cannot employ a step one. Let's say that you work late and choose not to run outside because it's cold and dark. You know that at the gym you normally have feelings of inadequacy and you wish to reduce that. This is where you have to face the situation you have been trying to avoid, so you need to modify it, so reduce to its impact on you. You modify the situation to insulate your emotions by actively changing the terms for success. You alter your expectation to something that is more realistic and doesn't set your off set up set your off for failure. Just because you cannot go fast as more doesn't mean that you can't run for a long. If you adjust the rules and make it make it so you are competing only with yourself, then you are in can't lose situation. After all, you are the one writing the rules of for yourself. Why do you need to be strict and harsh? The third step to shift your focus. When you cannot avoid or modify a situation, you can always change what you focus your attention on. If you are upset by something, you fix it. You fixate on it your own detriment instead of being preoccupied by runners faster than you. Shift your focus to gym grocers who are much faster than you. You can also shift your focus to yourself and your own running. Perhaps you aren't running so fast because you are always distracted and discouraged. Concentrate on improving yourself and reaching your own goals instead of beating someone else. You don't need to compete with anyone but yourself. Whatever negative thought seems to be taking your attention, switch to positive ones. See the brighter side and try to feel gratitude for what you still have and others don't. It is quite difficult to feel both gratitude and emotion turmoil simultaneously. A step forward to change your thoughts. At the core at the core of your deepest emotions are beliefs that drive them. By knowing this, you can change your emotion by changing the beliefs that sustain them. Your negative beliefs is that everyone at the gym is judging you or your failures. Therefore, your emotion will reflect that. This is where you need to change your thoughts. To do this, think about how you view others at gym. Most of the time you don't really care what you do or you think the performance is better than yours. By that reasoning, or what if they feel the same about you? Believe the people judge don't judge and aren't even paying attention to you, and your emotions will follow and relax. Your emotions will follow and relax. What is the evidence that your beliefs are true, and what is the evidence that you are not? It if it helps, literally make it list and tally of the score. The fifth and final step of emotional regulation, when all else fails, is to change your response. This is true regulation. This is when no other step of this process work and you find yourself feeling without limits. Maybe you feel utterly destroyed, decided to give up, and are very close to tears or rage. Take a deep breath to gather yourself. Close your eyes and pause. Gather your inner reserve and force yourself at least to change your facial expression and keep it in. You are still in a react mode. Obviously you won't be able to. I did mention that emotion suppression was unhealthy, but this is different because you are trying to make it up to the point where you can respond instead to react. When we can reflect a bit more often, we will find perspective and a different and a healthier way to respond. By pausing in your tracks and taking a few moments to let them dwell on your emotions, you will find that you can actively regulate them. Another similar mode is called stop method, created by Carol VVR. Stop stands for stop. Simply pause and try not to let yourself be overcome by emotion. Take a breath. Breathe deeply to keep your heart rate in check. And notice your breathing in a conscious effort to keep it slow and measured. Observe. Ask what is going through your mind. Determine where your focus lies. Discover what you are reacting to and try to name the feelings swirling through your brain. Pull back your perspective. Pull back your for perspective. Ask yourself what is really happening, trying to incorporate different perspectives. Understand how little it ultimately matters in your life, and remember it is not instantly see disaster. Practice what works. Proceed with the best action you can take for the time being. Remember your values, make sure you are responding rather than reacting, and focus on your main goals for the situation at hand. Remember the inserting a delay between our intense emotions and our responses is always the end goal. None of the steps in this emotional regulation frameworks are easy, and at the some point trust the thrust of the next section simply increasing your tolerance to emotional discomfort and anxiety becomes a necessary step toward resilience and calm. The more you can take, the less you need to regulate. You will recognize some common elements from the regulation framework we had just discussed. The ABC loop. Sometimes we found ourselves falling into a loop where we are simply in an autopilot state of acting and thinking, which will always lead to undesirable outcomes. Your feelings get hurt, you shout and react, and you compound your negative feelings with guilt and shame, or you face a new and a scary situation with panic and avoidance, instantly convincing yourself that you cannot possibly rise to meet those challenges. If we have been engaging with these patterns for a long time, we might even have convinced ourselves that overthinking, overanalyzing, and rumination are the best, most rational path forward. In fact, you might think you are engaging in the framework of emotional regulation, and you might think that you are responding rather than reacting. But how you can you know for sure? These automated actions are very difficult to see in the heat of the moment because we are so used to doing them without thinking. This is why building self awareness and understanding the patterns of your thoughts and behaviors are essential for emotional resilience. Without this, you will not only be able to address the symptoms and not the cause. There are a few tools for this, and they emulate talking therapy in some ways because they force you to really analyze your actions and answer actions that you'd rather not. You'll recognize a few elements and these tools from prior chapters, but there is always a different perspective in each new tool that can assist with self-awareness. The ABC loop is a classic behavioral therapy technique that considers all the elements that contribute to a behavior. It extends to incident, a behavior, and consequence. The middle section, the behavior, is often called the behavior of interest, and the techniques works by looking at the behavior and refer to understand why the behavior is the middle occurred. It's also what you want to examine and regulate or control, hence the increased scrutiny on it. In isolating these three elements, we can begin to understand what is actually happening in the external world and how it relates to emotion we feel. Wait for some minute, okay? Let's begin with an incident. This is the environment, the events, or the circumstances preceding the behavior of interest. Anything that happens before the event that may contribute to the behavior would fall into this category. When identify the anecdotes, so an incident, anecdotes, consider where and when they are occurring, during what activity, with whom they occurred, and what any others were doing at the time. Write down a mental snapshot of everything you can recall. You never know what might be pertinent to be Abishilo. For example, perhaps you are someone who finds yourself constantly arguing with your parents. You might realize that most of the time you don't even agree with what you are arguing with, but you do it anyway. You want you want you want to stop this behavior, so you think about the last time it occurred. Set the scene first. In the situation, dinner at your parents' house, early afternoon. Early afternoon, things were going to fine. The television was playing. The topic of our future came up, and you are talking about how job and your career goes. This is the anecdotes. Then we move on a behavior which is the focus of this technique. This behavior can either be pivotal, which leads to further undesirable behaviors, or distracting, which can interfere your own with your own life or the lives of others. In this case, the behavior is uncontrollable. Anger, which is pivotal because it causes stress and irrationally. In other parts of your life too, it is important to describe the behavior in full when looking back. In hindsight, there is some overreaction on your part, a complete lack of listening and validation on their part, and the feeling that you must make yourself hard. In this situation, there are raised voice, dramatic gestures, insults thrown, and intentionally vicious comments being said, most of which were irrelevant to actual argument. List of the consequences of the behavior. This outcomes is important because it is often one of the reinforces the behavior. If the consequence is one that is genuinely undesirable, most unwanted behaviors will not be repeated. But if there is some sort of reward that is incidentally received, that the behavior will continue. In this case, the outcome may be one of your parents. Usually, your mother leaves the room upset, and the dinner is cut short, whereby you then go home. However, you might feel that you have won and encounter the make him your mother back down, and this would be a positive reinforcement reinforcement to continue engaging in this sort of behavior. But it is actually positive if everyone has been walked of a frenzy, and it is a feeling an adrenal residue of a loud argument. You got a little piece of satisfaction, but it is probably not a net positive interaction here. Now comes the analysis of the Avicii. To anecdote, as mentioned before, is the family dinner. It is important to mention the last thing to happen before the behavior. In this case, it was question about career goals and aspirations. Already, we have identified an important factor of the situation, considering this is the last casual questions before the argument. It is clear that this is a catalyst. If you are looking back at your own event and are able to identify the catalyst, consider why it affects you so much. Do you always react in the same way? If you can identify what it is that catalyze a behavior you want to stop, then you can focus on it and actively try to redirect your behavior when you encounter a similar situation again. This is where we also start to think about emotional triggers and needs. Why is this so triggering for you, and what need is to uncovering that isn't fulfilled? This doesn't happen with everyone, just your parents. Why are they triggering you, and what emotional needs is incentivized with them especially? The next thing to observe is that behavior itself. In this case, it is uncontrollable yelling, but it can be a whole range of different ones. Think about why it is that you choose this behavior. In this case, maybe you feel as if you are not being hard. Maybe you want to exercise some control or authority, or over compassionate because you are feeling concerned. Whatever the reasoning behind it, think about what purpose it serves. Usually this is a coping or defense mechanism, but it is actually happening. But is it actually happening? Your purpose there here is actually to make sure that your emotional need is either dependent or fulfilled. Is your behavior working toward that goal? If not if not is there another way to behave to get a better outcome with regard to your emotions? Even if it is something as simple as talking a moment to calm down, having leaving the situation, or telling someone that you are not an emotional state to continue. Find a redirect find to way redirect your behavior so that you can produce a different emotional outcome. The last thing to consider is the consequences. If it is a recurring behavior, then that must mean you get some reward out of it. In this scenario, your mother has left the scene directly after the argument and you are forced to go home. Maybe this is exactly what you want. to spend less time with your parents. Maybe you just want them to support your career or what it means they aren't. Then you don't wish to be there anymore. Maybe you want to score a win over them or be last person standing and have the last words. Have you learned anything from this experience or these consequences simply that you will double down your behaviors from before? Do you feel compelled? Do you feel compelled to change anything to make it so that your anecdote isn't triggered even worse time and behavior doesn't keep growing in proportion. An easy question to ask in the following: does the consequences make you feel good or bad? So now consider the overall outcome of this event that we have to analyze with the ABC loop. When we can see that we are emotionally triggered by some combination for our parents, and the topic of the failure, and there is a particular emotion need to pan that comes out in this sitting anecdote. Next, we see that our behaviors are somewhat unhealthy response to this emotional emotional needed and pain, and in- aren't necessarily about the topic or sitting by themselves behavior. We observe we observed finally we observe that we have defended our emotional need to pain so hard what we are cause that we cause turmoil in the relationship. And though this is a small victory for our emotions sold in only makes and anecdotes behavior more likely to be amplified in the future.